Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to call to order the Monday, June 2nd meeting of the Cabarrus County Board of Education in our work session. And before we get started, I would like to recognize Mr. Lewis Burgess, SRO from Cox Mill Elementary School, who's here tonight to provide our security. Thank you very much for being here. We appreciate all you do out at Cox Mill. Okay, board members, I'd like to ask for a motion to approve the agenda as submitted.
So moved.
I've got a motion by Mr. Harrison,
Second.
a second by Mr. Shoemaker. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, the agenda has been adopted, and we will move on to our reports, and we will ask Ms. Donna Smith to the podium. For a report on McKinney-Vento. And I'm sorry, and I left off Mr. John Basilis. Welcome. Thank you for being here.
I'll just make a few brief comments at first. This is one of the annual reports that John will need to do each year on McKinney-Vento, because it's very important for us to be able to update you with where McKinney-Vento is in the district, and to say we're continue as we did last year, to say we're very pleased with how this program has become clearer and cleaner in terms of how we go through identification and also how we serve the students. And for that, I turn it to John.
Okay. And I want to thank you for having me here tonight. I appreciate the board giving me time to briefly inform you about Cabarrus County Schools' McKinney-Vento program. As Donna said, it's important to update you annually about our work to support the success of our district's homeless children and youth. So, as many of you know, the McKinney-Vento Act was the first federal legislation to deal with homelessness. It was signed into law in 1987 by President Reagan and represents the work of the 100th Congress. The McKinney-Vento Act supports homeless students' rights to remain at, get to, and succeed in school. The Act recognizes that school can be a source of stability to students whose lives may otherwise be chaotic or transient. So, who are we talking about? Well, the federal definition for McKinney-Vento includes all students who lack fixed, regular, and adequate nighttime residence. So let's look at these terms for a moment. Fixed. Fixed means it's a dwelling and not something on wheels or pegs like a car or a tent. Regular means that it's a place the child can stay on a routine basis, predictably, and not as a transient member or a guest. So this is not staying in someone else's home for a short period of time or in a hotel. And adequate. Adequate means that there is sufficient space for the child, so this includes families who are doubled up due to evictions, foreclosures, or people staying in abandoned or buildings or dwellings. Locally, about 80% of our identified homeless families are considered doubled up as a result of economic hardships caused by foreclosures, evictions, or natural disasters. These families are considered to lack adequate housing. The remaining 20% are split among motels and shelters and therefore lack regular housing. Now let's briefly examine how families come to be homeless. Here's an image from Hope House in Milwaukee's Pinterest page, though I've seen this in a lot of other websites. This wheel clearly conveys the multiple forces that contribute to homelessness, and it may challenge people's preconceived notions about why families become homeless. Clearly, job loss is the largest cause of homelessness, with bills being higher than earnings and evictions by family members being the next greatest. Oftentimes, people will focus on the left side of the wheel as their explanation for homelessness. For example, a 2007 Fannie Mae and Gallup survey revealed that 85% of Americans believe that substance abuse is a major reason for homelessness. But you can see that for this wheel, that is not the case. Based on my review of McKinney-Vento local eligibility, it is my belief that our local data will align with this wheel closely, with job loss and economic reasons as the primary sources of homelessness. So now let's take a moment to review a subpopulation within McKinney-Vento. And now we're going to talk briefly about unaccompanied homeless youth. So who are these kids? Unaccompanied youth are children or youth who are not in the physical custody of the parents or their legal guardians. They may be what's called couch surfing, which is living by the good graces of other families or friends for short time periods, and they may be living with friends or family members who can be nothing more than a short-term resource for these young people. Let's take a moment and we'll look at the trends and identification of homeless students over the last 7 years. You can see plainly that the number of identified homeless students greatly increased between the 2007-8 school year and the 2010-11 school year. Over the last few years, we've seen a large but stable number of identified students. The next slide shows a correlation between the rate of McKinney-Vento identification and the percentage of students on free and reduced lunch. As you can see, the trends are highly correlated. Now, it's worth noting that once identified as McKinney-Vento, students are immediately eligible for free and reduced lunch. As a point of reference, please note, on an average, a locally identified McKinney-Vento family has 2 students enrolled in Cabarrus County schools, with 1 student being the median and 1 student being the mode. Families with 1 or 2 enrolled children comprise 55% of our eligible students. Moreover, the overwhelming majority of students served by our local McKinney-Vento program are established Cabarrus County school students, comprising about 80% of eligible youth. In other words, the students who are identified as McKinney-Vento eligible typically are students who began as Cabarrus County school students. In addition, most students who are identified as eligible for McKinney-Vento services do not carry over across school years. For example, in the 2013-14 school year, the number of carryover cases reduced by approximately 20% when compared to the start of the previous school year. It's important to note that ongoing eligibility for McKinney-Vento students is reviewed on a regular basis. Once a student is determined to be in a fixed, regular, and adequate nighttime residence, the student's service eligibility ends immediately. If the family has achieved stability outside of the boundary of their school of origin, that student may maintain the right to enrollment at that school, but they will not be provided with transportation services once they've become stable. Okay, now let's review a few of the key provisions of the McKinney-Vento Act. So we're back at this idea that McKinney-Vento supports homeless students' rights to remain at, get to, and succeed in school. This includes the important work our transportation staff has done. It also includes the work of our enrollment folks in making sure students have immediate access to school. As a point of reference, it's important to know that students have the right to remain in their school of origin. School of origin is the school the students were enrolled in at the time of their original displacement. So we throw around that term school of origin. I just want you to know what I'm saying when I say that. It's also worth noting that a student might opt to attend a school which serves the domicile in which they are currently residing. Most often, though, students opt to remain in their schools of origin. Okay. Our work as a district is successful because of the sensitivity, awareness, and compassion of our staff at a lot of levels. School office staff often detects problems with students and notifies student service staffs who further examine these cases. And I know you all are well aware of the work that our transportation department does, but I can't say enough good things about how quickly they respond to our students' needs. Among the many moving parts are the folks in child nutrition about whom I previously mentioned work to ensure that our homeless students eat. Finally, I want to briefly mention our recent submission for a grant to support the expansion of shelter-based services with community partners and organizations. We have a current relationship with Cooperative Christian Ministries, which is a local faith-based human services agency that engages the needs of homeless families. Currently, we're providing on-site tutoring to people served by their programs. We want to expand that to continue that tutoring, to expand that tutoring, to offer social emotional support to these young people, for referrals for mental health and early childhood services. And we would also like to offer financial literacy for older unaccompanied youth, who I mentioned earlier. That's important because if you think about it, we know that the age group of 18 to 24 is a large and growing area of homelessness. This group would be particularly at risk for continued homelessness. So if you think about your own position when you were between 18 to 24, you probably had a support network that you could have fallen back on. Even if you were very self-sufficient, even if you were a true self-starter, you probably had somebody in your life that if things fell apart, you could fall back on somebody. These kids don't tend to have that. So giving them some financial literacy skills early, or at least on their way out of our system, is probably a very good idea for their future. So that's part of what our grant submission will address. I'm really optimistic about that grant submission and hoping to hear that we've been awarded that grant later this month. So I want to thank you for your time and your continued commitment to our district efforts to support the success of our homeless children and youth.
Great. Thank you very much for
Sure.
that report, and we're going to let board members ask questions
Okay.
or make comments if they would like to, and we'll start with Mr. Walter.
Yeah, I just appreciate all that we're doing. I mean, that's a tough situation these students are in, and that we're reaching out, especially the partnership with CCM. I just applaud you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Walter. Ms. Carpenter, do you have any comments?
Yes, the only question that I had, I noticed within the material that you supplied to us, one of the things that it said that with the McKinney-Vento students, that we do need to offer the same opportunity for extracurricular activities as other students, and that this includes the opportunity to engage in music clubs and activities.
Right.
What kind of things are we doing to offer this to these students?
So those have to be handled at the school level rather than at the district level. And we're really not tracking the rate at which that's occurring currently. So I wouldn't say we don't know what we're doing. I'd say that it tends to. I would say it tends to occur at the school level. It's certainly something that if you'd like me to examine more thoroughly, I certainly can get you some information on that. Okay. So what you're looking for then is, are you looking for the percentage of students who are involved in such programs?
Yeah, I'd like to see what kind of activities we are doing and see,
Okay.
if we get some data on that, that'd be great.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay. Are you asking for, whatever club or athletic or whatever the school has, they're eligible for? So you
That's
asking,
correct.
what are we doing to tell them that they're eligible?
Well, we do. I'm sorry.
Because we may be doing that.
Yeah. So we do at the time of their notification for McKinney-Vento eligibility, they're notified that that students are able to fully participate in school activities, fully participate. Now, the challenges they face, predictably, are the challenges that a lot of our students face when it comes to things like transportation to and from after-school activities. So that's a unique challenge for our population who's economically disadvantaged and may not have that type of transportation.
And I think we'd add there that we offer these students the same opportunities we offer all of our students, because the neat thing I believe about this is when you step inside a school, you cannot pick out this child homeless, this child none, because at the time, whether it's through the school counselor, whether it's through the school administration or the classroom teachers, they're bringing that child along just as they are all of the others and present the same opportunities. And when they're aware that they're unable to participate, then the school works to assist in that need. And I think that's what you're referring to, not at the district level, but at the school
Right.
level, they provide that. And that's one of the neat things, again, about this, as the staff reports back when students are decertified, if that's the best word to use, in the sense that this student has become a full part of this school. And for that, where they continue to want to stay at that site, we feel like they have that relationship built, and therefore they feel a part. And ultimately, that's our goal for all of our students.
Yeah, I agree with Ms. Carpenter. It'd be a shame if there was a student that just for whatever reason didn't realize that they were eligible,
Right.
and just didn't know, and then they are. So,
Right.
but, okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Mr. Shoemaker, do you have any comments? Or questions?
Well, John, I just want to thank you for what your department's doing. And, I've had a firsthand experience, and you and I had some conversations. And I want to just let the board know that this is a huge success story of how this district has responded to the McKinney-Vento. And you saw his graph, how quickly the numbers began to jump. And John and I talked about process improvements, and John Can you kind of tell the board where you've been and where you are right now on how quickly you're able to matriculate children through this process?
Sure, it's a very quick process. It really generally occurs within 24 hours of an application being submitted. So we have a system called DataPoint where we're able to electronically enter our applications, and that allows me to review them really quickly. Social work staff is amazing about responding to the needs quickly, loading those applications, getting them so that I can review them rapidly, and then notifying our transportation department and our enrollment staff, basically within 24 hours of us getting the application.
But in the past, it was even longer than that.
Right.
A couple, 3 years ago,
right.
even.
Yeah, it was a. We've come a long way, I'd say, from a system that was paper-based and fax-based to being electronic, and that just has made us a lot more nimble and a lot quicker in responding to these students' needs.
And we'd add there the support of the district in saying we needed someone directly to oversee that as opposed to adding that responsibility to a list.
Yeah.
The person previously were doing this in addition to about 5 other job responsibilities. And even though John has other responsibilities, this became a primary role, which helped direct more attention to that.
Right.
So if you were to lose the data point, what would that do to you?
If we lost DataPoint, the great thing about DataPoint is it's secure. So unlike some platforms that are out on somebody's server somewhere, I don't know where, DataPoint is one that's accessible only through Cabarrus County computers. So for me, it would be a tremendous loss. I don't have an answer to your question because I haven't thought about it. Candidly, I don't want to think about it because it's not something I want to have to imagine happening. If it did, we'd come up with some plan to respond to it, but it would be a setback. It really would be a setback. It's an important part of the infrastructure that keeps our response time really quick.
So right now, you're able to matriculate children by the next day in your process. So really, that's about as good as you can get. Do you think? Or
I
do you
think
you're
so.
at your
And I think that's true. I mean, realistically, we could matriculate students the same day, and often we do. But the reality of it is, there may be some things at the school level of having to coordinate a schedule and having to coordinate records. But in terms of just being able to get the student cleared for enrollment, we can do it same day or within 24 hours.
Great. Now, in reference to Ms. Carpenter's question about extracurricular,
Right.
these children aren't, if they were to participate in extracurricular, are we obligated to provide them transportation at that point?
That's a major challenge. We are not obligated to provide transportation to them. We are obligated to provide the same opportunity we would provide to another student, comparable in that boundary. So we don't offer transportation to young people from their sporting events to their homes afterwards. So it goes with our McKinney-Vento students.
So that could be a huge hurdle for them.
That is a tremendous hurdle to their after-school participation, sure.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shoemaker. Ms. Carpenter, do you have another question?
Yes, I'm sorry. One
That's right.
thing I forgot to ask. Out of the 296 we're showing for this year, could you tell me how many of those are from that we have to go out of county to transport, or
So-
do you know?
Okay. I would tell you that it's a small number this year, and offhand, I can't tell you with absolute accuracy, but I would tell you that I believe, when you say out of county, do you mean out of Cabarrus County? Okay. I would say that number is under a dozen students, likely under 10 students. I just can't tell you with absolute accuracy without the numbers in front of me. Okay.
Thank you, Ms. Carpenter. Mr. Shue?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. John, once again, thank you for being here for the report and all that. And I just have a couple of questions
Okay.
that I'd like to ask. And of course, part of this, that's your report, that we're talking about the local LEA having the 3-year opportunity to apply for a sub-grant, which is what you're wanting to do.
Right.
And what I wanted to find out was, do you know what the amount of the sub-grant would be? And then your purposes, intended purposes, are to improve the McKinney-Vento services, and I'd like to know what those services are, the intended services for improvement, and the amount of the sub-grant if we got it.
Great. So the sub-grant is for $30,000 per year over the next 3 years. So it would go through the end of the 2016-17 school year. And those $30,000 would be allocated for tutoring services on-site at partner organizations, financial literacy training for our older students, social emotional supports for these students that are shelter-based, and referral for early childhood services for young people that are shelter-based. Additionally, a portion of those funds will be reserved for training and development of staff in the area of homeless education, and there's a portion, it's a modest portion, set aside for transportation, to offset the cost of transportation, but it's not nearly enough to offset completely our transportation burden.
Yeah, well, by getting the vans that we purchased last year before last, no doubt has saved a lot of money with the transportation department. So that's always good when you can figure out a better way to get the kids back and forth. Now, the sub-grant you say is for $30,000. Now, obviously, we get a primary grant. Is there a primary grant that we get just for McKinney-Vento?
Well, no. I mean, McKinney-Vento, people use the term unfunded mandate a lot. I think that's probably close to applying when you talk about McKinney-Vento. There are some set-aside funds as a part of Title I. There's a formula for determining what that amount needs to be, but there's not a specific primary grant for McKinney-Vento.
Okay, well, I did notice in my review of the Title I application, which Ms. Tara will be doing here in a little bit, and we noticed that there was some McKinney-Vento homeless children funds set aside for that.
Yes.
So those funds, in addition to this sub-grant, would surely improve the services that we're providing to these children. And I just have one more question that was relevant to what Ms. Carpenter asked. Of the 296 children that we have, I don't necessarily care how many we're doing out of the county, but I would like to know what percentage of the 296 are we actually having to transport? Do we transport all of them, or is it a certain percentage of them? I mean, with 20, I believe we bought 22 vans, I believe.
Right.
And so do we go all to pick one up, or do we have a route, or we those type things, because we just do this every now and then, so I just...
Sure. So part of your question, I feel like I can begin to answer. Part of it I might ask Mr. Meehan. I might defer to Mr. Meehan to add a little bit of information to. But most of our students receive some form of transportation. Many of our McKinney-Vento students are living within the boundaries of their schools. Most of our students are living within Cabarrus County. We do provide transportation to the overwhelming majority of our students. I can't tell you the exact percentage, but I'd be surprised if we're providing transportation to less than 85 to 90% of our students. We're providing transportation to most of them, but for some of them, those are established routes already in their boundary. So the second part of your question was...
Well, but you alluded to another question here at the same time. You're saying that if they live within the district's jurisdiction,
right,
do they ride the McKinney-Vento vans, or do they ride the school buses?
Yeah, would you please?
If they live within their feeder district,
Right.
then our regular routes with yellow buses will pick them up from the McKinney-Vento students. If they live outside of their feeder district, we've had to be very creative, either with the vans or sending some of our buses outside of their regular feeder district to pick these students up. We did purchase 11 vans. And it's significant because we were able to add those 11 vans to the state fleet, which means they're maintained, the fuel and the driver salaries are paid by the state just like a yellow bus. We're the only LEA in the state right now doing that. So the savings is absolutely tremendous. And John alluded to a small portion of the money going from McKinney-Vento to federal program to transportation. Well, last year we received $30,000 from John's office for transportation. Locally, we paid $700,000 for McKinney. This year we're roughly at $500,000 into it, and by using the vans from November till now, locally it's only been about $135,000. So taking away the yellow buses and using the vans are paid for, and they're paying for themselves daily because we can run a van so much cheaper and have the state pick up fuel, driver, maintenance on that.
That's all I have. Thank you, Dan. Thank you, John, both.
Thank you.
And Donna, as always.
Thank you, Mr. Shue. Mr. Harrison, do you have any questions or comments?
Well, if there's a picture that anybody wants for how bad the economy has been, it's on your page 5 or your slide 5. That a few years ago there were only 75 McKinney-Vento children, and I assume that number was accurate at that time. Do you ever get the sense that there are some children who rightfully should be in the McKinney-Vento program, but for whatever reasons are not accounted for or don't apply or don't? How do you handle the situations that probably are out there but do not formally come before you?
So I feel strongly that we have a real sensitivity to and awareness about our McKinney-Vento students, about students who are homeless. Last year we did quite a bit of training and development electronically to our enrollment folks and our data managers to make sure, to our basically our school office staff to sort of be on the lookout to help us identify these students so that we could help meet their needs. So I'm sure, though, that there are always students that we're not detecting. There are posters in every school that clearly address the program and students' eligibility for it. We try our best to make sure people remain aware of it. But I do suspect that there probably are some students who we don't know about. As soon as we do find out about them, or if we suspect that, we have a process. We interview the student or their responsible adults and try to connect them with services as soon as possible. I wonder about the 75, the low number. I wonder if we just weren't. I don't know. I don't know if our awareness has gotten greater. Certainly, if you follow that wheel that talked about job loss and economic downturns contributing to homelessness, it would make sense.
There it is.
Yeah. Right.
Let's just add one thing, too. The parents have the right to decline services.
Yeah.
And we can go through the full interviews and evaluations and assessments with the family and be at the point to say, we would do the certification, and then the parent says, but I prefer not. And so that's always a parent choice.
I'm doing fine.
Right.
We're doing all right.
Right.
And some
Don't
really,
worry about us.
Some really are.
We're doing okay. We'll get by.
Well, and the great thing about our social work staff, I mean, our social work staff is terrific. They may have that experience with somebody in October or November, and they may have been told, no, go away, we don't need you, just as you're sort of alluding to. And then by February, they've revisited with a family, and they've said, thanks for coming back. We could really use the help.
Denial,
Right.
or some of those stages of
Yeah, right.
of denying the situation that they're facing as a
Sure.
family, much less the impact on the children.
Right.
I know every situation varies. It cannot possibly be cookie cuttered. So the best you maybe have as an answer to this question might be anecdotal. But how long does a child tend to stay in the McKinney-Vento program? And at a certain point, after a week, after 2 weeks, after a month, how are service offerings escalated to that child for the benefit of that child, and kind of peripherally for the benefit of the family? How do we work toward helping that family resolve their situation in an escalated way over X number of days or weeks or months?
Yeah. Well, okay, so this, obviously homelessness is a really complicated, it's a really complicated equation to solve.
And we can't fix that.
And we can, there's big
Per
pieces
se.
big pieces of that that we can't, that we really can't fix. So let's see. The first part of your question dealt with,
The duration of,
Yeah,
that a child might
the
be in.
duration. So I would say that
if there's an average or mean or something to that effect.
well, so I'd say that McKinney-Vento eligibility begins at the time of identification and ends at the end of that school year, but it can be carried over to the next school year. And what we know is that for the majority of our students, the overwhelming majority, they don't carry over. So going by last year's numbers, we had 48 out of 313 students who carried over. So that would mean that, just doing the math in my head roughly, probably about 80% during the school year, that their situation was resolved during the school year, with about 20% carrying over to the next year. That number will probably be similar, maybe a little bit lower this year in terms of how many carry over. So the overwhelming majority, it resolves within the same school year.
How do you go about kind of, again, maybe not the right word, recertifying
Yeah.
a child as eligible for McKinney-Vento?
Yeah.
Again,
Sure.
in certain staged
Yeah.
ways.
So it actually occurs on an ongoing basis, but at least annually, and at the time of each movement that the family makes. So when a family moves, one of the things that we have to understand is what's the nature of that move. Are you placed? Have you achieved stability? Or is this another time where you're doubled up in a shelter or a motel rather? So during those times, we do basically a de facto eligibility check, in essence, to see what the family status is before we connect them with further services such as transportation. And we also have a process for assessing that at the end of the year that considers a number of factors to determine if the family has, in fact, achieved some stability, and if they are, in fact, still homeless.
And our work with the families continues to address the goals of the family in terms of how are they planning to move from this point to the next point. And quite often, we're a referral agency to outside community partners, as I think we would say, who can provide services to assist this family or make the family aware of options that helps them better their circumstances.
I don't say this lightly. You're doing God's work.
Thank you. Well, thank you for saying that. I must say again that there's a lot of moving parts, and there's a lot of people working really, really hard to make that happen. Transportation, social work, school counselors, office staff, child nutrition. So they are really, really working hard to do just what you're saying. So on their behalf, I say thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Harrison. Dr. Phillips, you have questions or comments?
Just a couple. You may have said it, but I missed it. To what organization are you applying for this $30,000 a year grant?
That is through I'm sorry, I'm blanking on you. That's it's a federal grant that we applied through the state as a pass-through.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
So hopefully this one will be a little bit easier.
Yeah,
What you're doing here is an example of how the mission of public schools have expanded.
Right.
This is beyond just educating children in a classroom. It's one of the reasons why our budgets have gotten larger over the years. It's because we're being asked to do more. But it also means that we need people that have a different skill set. And so I'm just curious, what is your background? What drew you to this?
My background, I'm trained as a mental health counselor. I've worked in social service agencies, foster care agencies. I've worked in mental health agencies. I've done counseling, case management. I've done a lot of different things that have worked with disadvantaged populations since the early 90s through now.
Well, I'm glad you're with us.
I left out substance abuse. How did I leave that out? So yeah, thank you.
Not a substance abuser, you need to say that.
Right.
Sorry.
Clarify that.
Thank you for the clarification.
Well, thank you very much for
Sure,
the
thank you.
report. I don't have anything to add. I
Thank
just
you.
appreciate your your hard work and for you being part of our group here and providing this information to let us know as a board what all you're doing at the really where the rubber meets the road for kids that we hope make it. I mean, but
Yeah.
they're having a hard time taking care of a lot of their daily tasks. So you guys are stepping in and doing what you need to do. We certainly do appreciate it.
Great, thank you.
All right, board members, we will move on to 3.02. We'll ask Mr. Dave Burnett to the podium and discuss the voluntary annexation of Hickory Ridge Middle School and Hickory Ridge High School property into the town of Harrisburg.
Thank you. Appreciate that. And hopefully you all can see the graphic up there. That is the campuses of the high school and the middle school. What this item is, currently it's a report. Raging Ridge Road will be extended to Stallings Road through a cooperative effort of the county, the town of Harrisburg, and NCDOT. Currently, Cabarrus County Schools owns and maintains the road, Raging Ridge Road, and that's something that school systems would prefer not to do. You'd rather have your money be spent elsewhere. And part of this effort really will go to that. What we're asking is that we pursue a annexation with the town of Harrisburg. With that, the town will maintain the road instead of Cabarrus County Schools. In order for that to happen, though, with regard to this project, NCDOT first would accept the road. We would hope that they accept it as is. They would extend and perform the work to extend the Raging Ridge Road to Stallings Road after they finish the project. And I think there's a specific amount of time that they have to wait. They would then be turning it over to the town. If there's any project-specific information or questions that you have, Tim Lauder is here in the audience with us, and he's really ready to and able to answer any specific questions on that. As far as the annexation, which is really our item here, the annexation request is actually very simple. It's 2 items. This is it. And it asks that it says that the undersigned owners of real property respectfully request that the area described in the paragraph below, which is here, be annexed to the town. Also, the second thing is it talks about the boundaries of the property. So we have this information filled out. As we reviewed this and saw this and with previous discussions with the legal counsel, first we thought we were going to be able to do this administratively and we were going to do this as a report too. But seeing how the town had phrased the report, really we wanted to come back and change that to an item to where the board approved it, and maybe that went on the consent agenda if the board was agreeable to that.
Okay, Mark, do you have any comment on that?
Yeah, I do think it makes sense, since they're asking us to, as a board, approve the annexation. It really should be an action item as opposed to a report. So I think a motion from one of you to move this, either for the consent agenda or the action item for next Monday night makes sense, just so we can have a formal vote so the record's clear you've approved the annexation. And obviously you can have any discussion you want tonight about it. I think it's pretty straightforward, but I think it does make sense to have it formally acted on by the board.
Okay, board members, that's, we'll go through with questions, any questions anybody might have for Dave, and then we'll discuss Mark's advice on the agenda. So we'll start with Dr. Phillips. You have any questions on the annexation?
No, I really don't. It sounds like a win-win for the school district and hopefully for the town as well.
Great, thank you. Mr. Harrison?
And I'm trying to limit my comments to what is germane. I mean, I know this is an annexation issue and a ownership of the road, but once a road is extended out into Stallings Road, that is the plan, isn't it?
Yes.
Then that road will forever still be associated with Cabarrus County Schools. It will be a road to and from, or a cut-through, in effect, to and past those, our 2 schools, correct?
The road as it is positioned now will remain. It simply is going to be extended to Stallings Road. So we have 2 driveways, 2 schools that are going to be feeding off this road.
And I would feel this way about any similar circumstance anywhere in the county, but that Stallings Road is literally out my front door.
Okay.
And I know we are handing the property over to the the city of town of Harrisburg, and then their ownership is how they choose to proceed with it. But the traffic on that road and the foot traffic will presumably be to and from our schools and and among students going to those schools.
Certainly, you would expect a great deal of the traffic to be related and associated with the schools, specifically at certain times of the day. But it will be a cut-through. It will connect
Right.
the two roads. So.
And I've sent an email to Dr. Kirk offering to facilitate or assist in any way possible with communicating anything to the town of Harrisburg as the liaison from this board to the town of Harrisburg. They know extremely well that that exact area of Stallings Road where the drive would come out is highly, highly, highly prone to flooding, and it'll be up to their design to make that as safe as possible. None the same, the road will be to and from Cabarrus County schools, and the traffic on those roads will be predominantly children, families getting to and from the schools. Again, they'll own the road. I understand that point, but I just hope we can communicate to them at least my sense of urgency that the road be made as safe as possible for as much foot traffic and as regards to the flooding that's prone in that area. Again, we're trying to hand it to them, and they'll make those design considerations. Am I missing anything or not understanding anything about the
I was
process?
simply going to mention that it appears as though there are 4 tax parcels on that property. Cabarrus County Schools being 2, and then there are 2 other owners of the others, one at Hickory Ridge Road and one at Stallings Road. As far as the ownership, of the property, it relates to maintenance. That's the issue, that the town will be taking over the maintenance. The town will be pursuing some Pell grants, and that they will try to pursue some additional sidewalks and landscaping and things like that, which will help, with the property, will help with some of the foot traffic that you were talking about. As far as the area prone to flooding, the DOT is very much aware of that.
Sure.
I believe, and Tim can comment on this, I believe that they said they were not going to make it to the 100-year flood, but if that's a specific issue for you, we can answer it. Go ahead.
Hi, good morning. The design actually is built to NCDOT standards to the point where the bridge will flood in a 500-year flood. It has to, in order to have a no-rise certification, we have to do a no-rise certification because it has a core slab bridge that will cross over the road itself and tie into Stallings Road above the 100-year floodplain. So the entire road will be out of the 100-year floodplain. But in a 500-year storm event, it is designed with low points on each side of the bridge to allow that flow over in order to have a no-rise for the residents upstream of that crossing, per se. But it is designed to make it do that. It has sidewalk on one side that will allow access for that subdivision and the future subdivisions across the street. And it also has turn lanes and that sort of thing to allow turn movements both directions coming off Stallings Road. We are flattening out the curb in Stallings Road to allow that road to be much flatter. All the 100% widening will go to the inside of that curve, allowing that to be a much flatter situation in there.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Harrison. Did you get all your questions answered?
Yes, Mr. Chair, and I'll be happy to make a motion regarding this in a few moments.
Okay, well, we'll move forward. Mr. Hsu, you have any questions or comments?
Not necessarily any questions, but I'm just glad to see the project get on with it because we've been working on this for 5 or 6 years, however long the middle school and the high school out there has been there. It's going to save the residents a lot of time, make everything more convenient for everybody from Hickory Ridge Road over to Stallings Road. And, in the way that Diener, which has actually been part of the holdup on this between Environmental and Natural Resources and the Department of Transportation, between those two entities, that's where the holdup's been for all these years. And I think DOT is pretty much funding all of this project, I believe, aren't they? mean, I think they're funding, we're not, I don't think Cabarrus County Schools is involved in the funding part.
Cabarrus County Schools is not funding
Right,
it,
right.
but there is some contribution from the county. At least that was some early discussions.
I don't remember, because this goes back for 5 or 6 years. Tim, you might remember how much the county put into it.
Actually, the school budget for the project is, it actually started out as a school project at one time and moved to Cabarrus County. And Cabarrus County did pull together some funding for some other capital projects in order to do this. The total budget for the project is about $1.49 million. It's actually under the $1.5 million cap, which is the funding mechanism necessary for DOT to be able to participate. And what DOT is going to put into it basically is $450,000 plus another $50,000 worth of design services for the bridge itself. So basically a $500,000 contribution from NCDOT. They will be letting the project under local programs because it's under $1.5 million. They can do that. That's another reason it needs to be in the city, because it's an urban program, so it needs to be within the city limits in order to be funded that way. Of course, then we'll be coming back to you probably in the next month or two with a plat for that road right-of-way that will have to be dedicated then to NCDOT for them to put the road into. Once DOT builds the road within that right-of-way, they will keep the road for 1 year, and then they will transfer it back to the city of, or to the town of Harrisburg for their municipal power bill program to be for maintenance, that sort of thing. So it kind of has to go through these little odd steps in order to pull all the programming and the funding in. But actually, Cabarrus County will be providing about $1 million of the funding.
Is that right? So the county will be putting about $1
Two-thirds
million
of
into
it,
that
yes.
then? Well, it's a good thing, though, because obviously that's Cabarrus County, and it's going to benefit the citizens of Cabarrus County and the students that go to that school. And I'm just glad to see the project on its way, but I'm glad you explained about the different entities and the time consumption of dealing with all those. But it looks to me like it's coming together now, finally. So appreciate all your help on it, Dave, Tim. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shue. Yeah, this has been percolating a while, because I think my very first month on the board, I went with Mr. Whitkey to a meeting in Albemarle at the DOT regarding this bridge. So, I mean, Carolyn may comment on it. There's been some funding things around. Senator Hartzell has mentioned it a couple times when we've seen him out. And so this has been going on for quite some time. So, Mr. Shoemaker, do you have any questions or comments? No? Ms. Carper, anything you want to add?
My question was, I didn't know, did they show this on the tip at all? And that's what I wasn't sure of,
Yes,
because
there's a thoroughfare plan that goes up through Miss Stallings' property on over toward Highway 49. It's going to tie into actually a Farm Mill Road. And so this road is designed to line up with that future connector should that ever be built.
but
Because,
they're not showing it on the tip, though, at all, or do you know?
No, not this portion of it, only up over to Stallings Road. But we're trying to make it line up so the intersections would not be offset.
Because I know with funding, we've been talking about this for so long, I didn't know if they had added anything on the tip at all for this.
Most of the tip funding moved because of the railroad project. And when that railroad project goes in, it's going to be a major traffic shift out there, the way the traffic's going to have to move, because all the Hickory Ridge Road, it will come in from there and tie in, and then the Stallings Road before it crosses the bridge over to 49. So it's going to be definitely a traffic change. So this will definitely be a major improvement for you to be able to access your schools during school hours.
Well, the other thing, and they kind of mentioned this briefly, what I was wondering in approving this, our right-of-way, if we approve this, do we need to do something else with this? In approving this, is this giving our right-of-way away now? Or what are we doing when we approve this?
Well, go ahead.
I was going to say, as Mr. Louder had mentioned, we will have to come back, and that will be for an easement. And that easement will be for at least the property that is for the extension. We'll have to see whether we have an easement already on the books for the existing. I kind of doubt it.
You don't. We are actually preparing that for Cabarrus County right now. It's an easement that will take the entire road section from Hickory Ridge all the way to Stallings. And two parcels will be affected. You have two parcels will be affected by that, and then Miss Stallings has another parcel will be affected by that. And all three of those will be acquired then and then transferred into DOT ownership for right-of-way in that one-year interim, and then transferred back to Harrisburg after that. It's a three-step process.
So then, what if the school system had to do something? Who would we go to if we, by some chance, needed to do something? Would we be going to DOT, or would we then would we be going to Harrisburg?
You'll be going to NCDOT in the first year, and then after that, you'll go to, it'll be the rest of that point in time, it'll be Harrisburg. Harrisburg will own the right of way.
So if we had to do something afterwards, we'd have to go to Harrisburg after that, if we ever had to do something on our property. Or
Driveway
it wouldn't be
connection.
our property after that, right?
You still have the property on both sides, all the only thing there is basically 80-foot right of way.
Oh, okay.
The DOT will have a dedicated right-of-way all the way from Hickory Ridge Road to Stallings Road. It won't be any different than any other road that our schools abut anywhere else in the county.
Oh, okay.
We don't control the road.
Okay.
Okay, thanks, Ms. Carpenter. Mr. Walter, do you have any questions?
Yeah, just a couple. We're talking Raging Ridge Road, that's the road, right? And, I mean, according to Google Maps, Raging Ridge Road also extends down to Hickory Ridge Middle School. Is that that's not included or is included?
As far as the extension project, that is east of the high school, and it's going from the high school to Stallings Road.
So what
But
do
the
we-
road is from Hickory Ridge Road all the way to Stallings Road. And that road is what is currently maintained by Cabarrus County Schools. And we will turn that over to the state, and then the state will eventually turn that over to the town.
Okay, it just appears to me on the map that they have the same name.
They will have the same name, it's basically an extension of that existing road. You call it Raging Ridge Lane now because it serves Raging Ridge, I guess. You know, that's your mascot situation, I guess that's how it was named. But what we're doing is basically extending from the entrance going into the stadium over to Stallings Road. We've got
Okay, so
about
it'll-
1,500 feet of extension tied onto about 3,500 feet of existing driveway. And then the whole thing together, about 4,800 some odd feet, then will be as one road unit transferred to NCDOT.
Okay, did they do a traffic study on how much increased traffic that's going to
Actually,
generate?
this was required by the traffic study when you built Hickory Ridge High School, it just never got built. So it was because of funding. But it was actually a requirement of that traffic study based on that. That road needed to be in as far as traffic patterns were concerned. So that was based on that existing traffic study that was done 2 years prior to you building actually Hickory Ridge High School.
And that's a great point, because currently you have two schools that basically have one driveway. That is not ideal. You want to have a separate exit, and this affords that opportunity.
Well, I can see significant savings for us, for our transportation. How do we get to the folks in Stallings Road now? You go all the way around? Is that,
Yes.
so that's significant savings in fuel anyway to go all the way around that, not have to do that. So that's plus on our part. The other concern is, I guess there's a speed concern because there's obviously speed humps on that road. What happens there? Are those allowed to stay so we can keep this, or we don't know?
Take over a road that has speed bumps.
Well, and that's something that we can negotiate, we can try. If we want them, we can pursue it. Can't say that it's going to happen, but it is something. that
Maybe
we
it's
can
better
pursue.
when you have a school hat on than a private developer hat on. So that's good to hear, because in my experience, I mean, you
Once
just.
it does
you're
become a
stuck.
town road though, then it can be allowed. So knowing that it's going to be a transition from just 1 year, we probably can negotiate with
Okay.
DOT to allow them to stay
Okay.
in, because I hate to take them back out and turn around and put them right
Right.
back in a year later.
Right.
Well, if it's a safety, if the speed is a safety issue by the school, they've obviously wanted them there. And so that would be a concern, but, and then the other thing you had mentioned is that there were 4 properties and only 2 of them that we own? So
Looking
just-
at the tax parcel map, yes, that's what it's looking like.
So it's that this request for annexation affects 2 other property owners?
That one right there.
You actually own this piece of property.
Okay.
What did
So
you-
we're showing, it's actually the property that's to the east at Stallings Road is a parcel that does not Board of Education property.
Right, but that has obviously tax implications on those property owners. So, because they're not a government entity, I'm sure that might be a concern for them.
You basically bought a right-of-way coming in off Hickory Ridge Road
Mm-hmm.
through an adjacent parcel there, and you own that right-of-way, that's your entrance road.
Okay.
There's a little small triangular piece on the other side, so actually there's 2 pieces of property involved there. Then you have 2 tracts that you own. One's Hickory Ridge High School, one's Hickory Ridge Middle School. Those tracts basically butt each other along that alignment of that roadway. And then the 4th tract is Miss Stallings' property at the very end of Stallings Road. So those, all 4 tracts will be identified as part of the easement
But
situation.
those folks would have to be cooperative. for
The
this.
only person that has to be cooperative is you and Miss Stallings.
Okay.
Otherwise, it's taken care of.
I see benefits to it. I'm just a little concerned about the speed issue going up and down that road if you have to remove this. the speed bumps. Thank you.
Okay, I don't have any further comments. I think everything got said that needed to be said. So, board members, Mark has given us an indication that instead of a report, that he thinks we need to take formal board action on this. So, do I have a motion to put this on the? Well, before we do that, is everybody okay with consent? Consent. Well, we're not. I mean, that's been discussed for the last 4 years. So, so if consent's okay, then I'll take a motion to add this to the consent agenda for next week.
Move to add this to the consent agenda for next
Okay,
week.
so we have a motion to add this to the consent agenda. And a second by Mr. Shue. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, that is on the consent agenda. So, Rob, I didn't mean to be short there. It's just, this is just our little piece of it. The town and DOT are taking care of the rest of that. So, okay. Now we're going to ask Dr. Louder to the podium, and we're going to discuss the redistricting plan for Odell and the new elementary schools. Before we get started on this, I would like to just reiterate to anyone listening, and it's either here at the meeting or on television, the administration will make a recommendation to our board on what the boundaries are. So then we will discuss that, digest it, ask questions. We'll have a public hearing about it. We may get another plan sometime later if that's what we ask for or whatever. So this is just merely the recommendation of the administration. And for also keep in mind, we do have a board member that's a member of the committee that's making the recommendation. But that's just for input. He's helping. That's Mr. Walter. He helps with that. But this is their recommendation to us on the boundary lines. And we are not going to take action on this next week. We're going to have a public hearing next week, and then this will be on our agenda in July. And of course, in July, we'll have a combined work session business meeting. There's only one meeting, and that's on July 14th. So with that said, we will welcome Dr. Louder, and we'll talk about new boundaries for our elementary school.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm going to go through a real short presentation here that kind of ends up with the maps, and then we can talk about the maps, and I can actually place one up here if we kind of want to refer to stuff together as a group. So just kind of to review a little bit of how we got here. Obviously, the area where we're building Odell in the Cox Mill area is an area of tremendous growth and population density. And density is the word that I think want to remember and want to make sure the public remembers is that area has lots and lots and lots of homes and students compact in a tight area in Cabarrus County. So that's one of the things that we're ultimately challenged with as we try to look for how to work with that. Obviously, growth and density leads to overcrowded schools, mobile units that are at both of those locations or have been for many years now. So as a group, when we get together and start looking at what our recommendations are for how to set those boundaries for the new school, we had lots of goals that I have listed here. First is to alleviate overcrowding. Second is to remove mobile units to try to get rid of all of them if possible. We wanted to keep neighborhoods as unified as possible. We wanted to populate the schools at approximately 85% capacity so we would have some room for growth in the future. And again, we want to allow for as much as possible in an area that we know has some density and some more growth that's coming with all of our forecasts that we have. So when we looked at all that information, that was what really led us to the K2 and the 3-5 concept that you guys have already seen and worked on. And so when we got to that concept, then we had to look at what is the best way to set that up, undercrowd schools, and give us an opportunity for growth. So as we move to the next slide that has the capacities of the school's current enrollment and proposed enrollment, I do want to take a minute and say what we talk about when we start looking at boundaries and lines at schools, we kind of used as an analogy when we were talking about in our group. Ultimately, you kind of start looking at dominoes. You look at one boundary, and then you look at the school boundary beside of that and think, oh, well, if we change that a little bit, and it can lead all the way to suddenly we're looking at the boundaries of 40 schools, which is obviously not what we want to do. But it makes you think, wow, if I could reset the boundaries now for everybody, we would come up with a different goal. So when we do that, we try to look at that and say, all right, what's the best way to get maximum capacity and ideas out of what we have without affecting more schools than we have to? And if you look at current enrollment and proposed enrollment, Cox Mill, Odell, and Boger were ultimately going to be affected by this decision. There was essentially no way around that. The one school where we wanted to kind of work with but then stop the domino effect was Weinkauf. As we looked at Boger and that area where the lines were, Weinkauf was a school that gave us some flexibility that we thought would be a good thing. So we don't necessarily have to talk about it in detail tonight, but we did want to mention that, as obviously you're aware, we do have Royal Oaks is on the bond issue right now as something that we're going to be looking at in the next 3 or 4 years in some kind of capacity. And when we did that, Weinkauf is very, very close to Royal Oaks. So with our proposal to move some students out of Weinkauf was a way to give us some seats and some flexibility to the school that it was next to it, which in this case is Royal Oaks. So we thought rather than have the school right beside of Royal Oaks to be almost at full capacity at 96%, we could take one group on a map that we thought made sense, and I'll be glad to show you that in a minute if you want to see it, to say this would now give us 100 seats or so at Weinkauf. So whatever we did at Royal Oaks, you would have some flexibility and some seats there. That's obviously something that you guys may not be aware of at the time, and it's not something that that we're insistent on. We just thought it was a good idea at the time. And so what I listed there is Cox Mill's current enrollment, and the percent number there is their percent at capacity. 116 for Cox Mill, 97 for Odell, 90 for Boger, and 96 for Weinkauf, and then tried to list the proposed enrollment under the plans that we're suggesting and what that capacity would be, which you could see is 87 for Cox Mill, 82 for Odell K2, 87 for Odell 3.5, 74 for Boger, and 82% for Weinkauf. The next map, I thought just as part of the presentation, as we start looking at these, a lot of people wanted different views of different maps. So I tried to put most of the ones that we had requests for. So the one up now is just our current elementary boundaries for all of the schools in Cabarrus County. The next one is the current boundaries of the elementary areas that are affected side by side with our proposed boundaries. Just another way to look at that. This map is probably the one that is the most helpful. The current boundaries of the schools are in red to show you where the boundaries are, and then you can see how they change. So again, you can see what areas are in red. That's current, and those boundaries that would disappear replaced with new ones. And then the next map is just the boundaries that we're suggesting without those in red. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, one thing I meant to mention in my opening remarks, and I wanted to alleviate any fear, we are not discussing in any way, shape, or form a middle school boundary or a high school boundary.
That's right.
So those are not changing. We are not talking about middle school or high school.
Right.
This is purely elementary school. So the reason I thought about that is the one where you show current boundaries in red.
Yes.
That red line running through the blue is the middle school boundary. Is that right?
The blue would be the new Odell
Oh,
boundary.
I'm sorry. Okay. But that more closely resembles the
Yes.
the middle school boundary.
That's exactly right.
Okay. That's
So
what I
thank you for clarifying. That's a great point. I'm glad you said that. The next one again is just it without red boundaries. And then we have a couple recommendations or just to justify or try to explain to you how we came to the zones that we came to. We tried to move them closest to the schools geographically. It doesn't always work out perfectly, but obviously we want to be as close to a school as we can when we draw the line. The second one is really important, I think, because a lot of the ORED and the projection studies, we tried to compress the Cox Mill attendance zone as much as possible because according to those ORED and projection studies that we have, that's the higher growth area. So we wanted to compress that area so there was more growth in the new Odell area. So if you look at that boundary, and again, we can point to that in a minute, we're trying to compress that and leave little area for development in what's left for the Cox Mill area. So there is a decent amount of that area which is commercial, the DeRuyter Road area, for example, where we tried to bring that in smaller and say, okay, there won't be as much growth here as we make it tighter. And then we left the Odell attendance zone where there is some room for growth, but right now, north of 73, there essentially is no water and sewer. So the development north of 73 is quite difficult and won't happen immediately. Now, over time, 10 years from now or so, I'm assuming that we will have water and sewer there. We obviously can't see the crystal ball for that. But for now, it was make this one smaller, leave room in another area, knowing that there's not going to be a lot of development north of 73 until there's water and sewer available in that area. Again, that drove a lot of where we decided on the lines. And then I guess our last slide was some of the questions that came up from you guys, and I've even already had some emails from parents, or about a mid-year opening and some of the things that occur with a mid-year opening. And so we just wanted to go ahead and recommend the way we looked at that at this point, which was to say, if we have a mid-year opening by February, essentially the end of first semester is right at the end of January. So to say, if we open in the middle of the year, we open by the beginning of second semester, then our recommendation is that we only split the Odell schools. In other words, we take the kids who are in the current Odell and we put them in an Odell K2 and a 3-5. We don't force students from Cox Mill and or Boger to move into those schools, and we don't permit them to move into the schools because we don't want 10 students in Miss Smith's class to decide to come and leave 10 students there, provide transportation to both places. So we said, if we've gotten through halfway through the year, let's just go ahead and split those students for the rest of the year, and then as we bring new schools in, we would begin the following year that way. And then secondly, kind of a precedent that we've done with most of the schools that we've opened is to grandfather rising fifth grade students, if they can provide their own transportation, to be able to stay at that school that they were at for 1 year, but that would not include siblings. And that's usually where the line comes. So you would say, rising fifth graders, yes, you can stay if you can provide transportation, but my kindergarten younger brother is not something that we've permitted. So again, precedence-wise, we've already kind of done those for many of our areas. So again, those are things that we thought may help and that you guys would want to consider as far as what we think would still be a very smooth opening and probably least disruptive to some of the people there. I did have as I said, an email from one mother who has a child who's a current kindergartner now, and her concern was, okay, so if my student is a second grader at Cox Mill, you're going to force them to move out halfway through the year, so they'll go K1, 2 for halfway through the year at Cox Mill, halfway through the year have to switch and go to a new Odell K2, and then the next year switch to an Odell 3-5. And so that scenario is essentially the reason that we're saying, well, if we just don't move people in that 1 year, we can avoid a lot of that until we get the schools open. So again, that's a brief overview. I can put up here if we need to together look at, you guys have the maps electronically. We're going to put the map up, probably the one with the red zone there, but we just wanted to put one up. We can't talk streets probably, but if we're talking general areas, we can point so everybody can see it at the
Can
same
you go ahead
time.
and put that on the easel? It might be a little easy in case there's somebody that wants to look at that one. Okay, realizing that there may be multiple questions and then one board member's question may spark a question by somebody else, we'll do this maybe we'll try to be as ordered as we can, but if you need to be recognized, just ask, and we'll kind of do it that way. But instead of blurting out a question, just ask to be recognized by the chair. But we'll start with Dr. Phillips. If you want to, Chris, were you done?
Yeah,
Are you ready for questions?
What I want to show is the Weinkauf area that we discussed, just so you'll see. In our current map, this little kind of boot down here at the bottom is Weinkauf, and what we did in this was just to come out and reach and grab this little area. So this area here is currently Weinkauf. Those are about 86 students. That it's a little bit of a change that we recommended. Let's go ahead and send those to Boger, and that gives us the seats close to Royal Oaks. If for some reason we need that place for.
Okay, the red line on that map?
Is Beverly Hills.
No, not the area, but the line. Is that a road or is that just a boundary line?
Yeah, this is the proposed boundary line now.
Okay, is there is that little section? What's the line of demarcation there? Is there a road that? Because I'm trying to look this on our electronic map. It looks like maybe there's a creek.
There's not a road.
It's not a road.
Yeah,
A lot of that is on the other side of 29.
That's right. So this now is current. The reason this is red is this is current Weinkauf, and we're proposing it become
Right. I just didn't know, even whenever that boundary was drawn, however long ago, that made it Weinkauf, if there was some line of demarcation that made sense. That's all I was trying to get after. So, okay, well, if you're done with that, we'll start with Dr. Phillips. Again, if you don't feel like you get it all, we'll come back to you.
Well, let's start with that section that is currently Weinkauf that you want to move to Boger. I mean, just eyeballing it, it looks like there's purple locations closer to Boger than that. So why grab that part that's way down in the south part of the Weinkauf area?
It was just, it's just, I mean, ultimately it comes down to strengths and density and where people are.
So our viewers can see what you're talking about. We need to move just a little bit.
I like it a whole lot.
All right. And so again, it comes down to, as we're studying these, it comes down to where students live and how many students live in what areas and what seems like a natural progression based on the street. With the totals that were there, it was a smaller group where about 86 students we moved over and said, all we're doing is extending this group here. And Weinkauf already kind of came down and curled back up. And so, again, geographically, to us, it made sense, but that's a change. It's something that, we didn't go into necessarily looking at.
Okay. And the other thing that concerns me, and it's like, well, we can always adjust boundaries again later on if it turns out that it's not quite right, but leaving Cox Mill at 87% of capacity when you open up a new school, I live in the Cox Mill area now, so I see every day how many houses are being built out there. I'm not sure that it'll be at 87%. I think it'll be over 90%. I'm just wondering, do you have any data that's showing what the expected enrollment increase is going to be in just the Brown area, the area that would remain in Cox Mill?
Yeah, again, it gets very difficult when we get into the crystal ball part of that, but this area, which is the part that we cut off right here, this area is where there's a lot of compacted growth. So when we leave this area here, again, that's where we were trying to compress and leave a good bit of commercial that to what we have as neighborhoods that are going to build out that we get from the county, we get about every 2 weeks. It looks like this is not going to be an area that's going to explode. Now, having said that, this whole area that we're looking at here has numerous housing development possibilities where sometimes things have started and not had action for months or years. Some of them can start up very quickly, or they can sit there for a much longer time. Those type of things of, is this area going to grow in the next 10 years? It absolutely is. But how and where it's going to grow, it does not look like either will be overburdened in a 6-7 year time period. So at the end of the day, is it possible that we're going to need another elementary school in this whole area or somewhat up here in the next 7 to 10 years? It's very possible. So we tried to say, all right, how can we make sure this school is not overcrowded and this school has enough capability to move? That is a guess, and it's, we're trying with the best we can with the information we can. How that opens and develops in the next 5 years will determine that. We take the best guess that we can based on our information, and we really like this area in particular being here and able to expand. There is one other area that we talked about that can provide some of that growth that we can look at as we go.
All right. Well, okay. Well, just following it. So if you look at the sections that are moving from Cox Mill into Odell, now the only neighborhood in there that currently has houses under construction is Cannon Crossing, which is at the corner of Poplar Tent and Harris Road. The Skybrook section, or that section of Skybrook that would be moving, is completely built out. There are no more homes that will be built there ever. The other neighborhoods north of Poplar Tent, I'm not aware that there are any houses being built there either. Where the houses are being built are in Winding Walk, which would still be in the Brown area, and in the Christianberry, right? Sorry, which is south. And obviously, you're not going to move Christianberry because it's south. But I'm just concerned that, that we may still be overwhelmed by growth in that area. So we may have to be flexible. How many more students can we accommodate at Cox Mill? If we're now looking at two more years, so if we're not going to move students in the middle of the year, that's 2 more years. How many students additional can we accommodate at Cox Mill? What's the largest number we've ever had?
How many? 1,300. We're at 1,150 now, and Ms. Moore is saying 1,300 is the most we've ever had. And that was how many mobile units?
That's what we are at now.
Right.
We have 12 mobile units, and that's where we were when we built for years ago.
Okay, so we have, with the 12 mobile units, which is the limit, we can accommodate 1,300, and we have in the past, so we know we can do that. Okay, so that would mean we could handle an additional 150 students, at least on an interim basis, which hopefully, knock on wood, that'll be possible. Okay, explain also just a little bit about the other areas north of Odell that are coming into Odell. Could you just point out those and the motivation?
I was going to mention, because I think this area here, so this is where the new Odell, the new old Odell, as we said before, the old Odell is being torn down property is here. Currently, these students go to Boga, okay? And we are pulling them into Odell. It is, as far as a number is concerned, this line through here could stay at Boger as far as numbers. Philosophically, we as a group had a problem and thought that the community may have a problem of being right here and saying, okay, I've been assigned to Boger, and I'm going to drive past Odell and wave at it on the right as I turn and come over to Boger. So while number-wise, this area in a lot of ways may make sense to stay at Boger, we just struggle, and we spent a long time on that, struggled with, are we going to have people get on the road and drive past Odell to come all the way over to Boger? We did not like that.
And those students also attend Harris Road Middle School.
Exactly.
They attend Harris Road Middle School and Cox Mill High School now, so they're attending Boger and then switching to another system. So this helps align that, not completely, but to some degree.
Exactly what Dr. Shepard said was the other reason where we said, okay, they're already going this way too. If they're not going to attend the middle and high, which we weren't going to address, then that's why we, and I want to say this is about 80 students, 60 to 80 students somewhere in here that we ultimately could leave at Boger, but we just had a problem with that Odell community and splitting it as we discussed before when we made the numbers.
And the other thing to remember is on that red line that you see, which is Odell School Road that you've been pointing to, on the east side of that line is also associated the reservoir. That's a highly restrictive W1 rating on that reservoir, and I don't think you're going to get a whole lot of development over there because of the impervious nature. I mean, because of the runoff factors. Development on that side is really difficult to do, and putting in the development over there would probably not happen. Now, on the other side of the road, yes, but on that side, no.
I thought you spilled coffee on your map. That's what I thought.
We ultimately struggled because it doesn't really look that professional, but we did. Boger has such a big and a strange kind of feeder zone, and a lot of that has to do with that reservoir and the water. So we said, yeah, let's just go ahead and color that in enough that they get an idea of how much water is in the middle of that.
Okay, Dr. Phillips, we'll come back to you. One of the things I meant to do was start with Mr. Walter, since he's on the committee. So we'll switch to the other side and get some comments from him or his perspective or any insight that he would like to provide.
Okay. Again, it's a lot of effort that this committee has gone through. Chris had gathered quite an experienced team of folks, and they went through a whole lot of scenarios. And from my perspective, I'm more as a parent, because I do have an elementary school child, and I kind of understand where the concerns are coming from. And these are families that we're moving. So we tried to make that, tried to keep that into consideration, not wanting to split up communities, like my neighbor from one side of the street goes to one school and one goes to the other. But we've got an overcrowding situation over at Cox Mill, and we've got to figure out a solution to that. And the best solution would be to move children out of Cox Mill into this new Odell area, and we came up, I think, that's how that line was developed. The folks that were to the west, I guess, of Harris Road, and then to the north of Poplar Tent Road. They're the closest to the Odell boundary. There really wasn't a whole lot of other areas to take any groups from unless you're splitting a subdivision of some sort. And that was a decent number. It brought the number down well below capacity. It was an opportunity to get rid of these mobile units, and nobody really wants their child in a mobile unit, so there's not there, so that's, it solved that solution as well. And I think on the other end, what was there? Again, the same thing as we've mentioned before, these other areas, they want to align the students. If they're going to the same elementary school and going to the same middle school, it made sense if they could possibly go to Odell. You don't want, again, I don't think we have another school other than Royal Oaks that's on a boundary line. So the folks across the street don't get to go to the school that's right closest to them. So that was a consideration for adding that area in. The area to the top, I think we decided not to include that because of the effect that it would have on Boger. Because I guess there were promises made to the folks at the farms to move them back to the new Odell. Well, that's a big chunk, that's a large chunk of students. That makes a big effect on Boger's population. And that lead back again, the domino effect that was mentioned earlier. You bring Boger down to 600 kids. You can't, that's a little bit, way too low. I know we need some surge and we need flex space. If Royal Oaks was to be replaced at the same site, you got to put those students somewhere. You need to have the room somewhat close by to do that. But in this area, I think that area down that we were talking about has an opportunity to be beneficial to those students that live there. I mean, at least when I'm sitting on this committee, I'm looking for win-win situations. What's the best we can do? We're forcing people to move, but what can we do for them? And on that situation, at least the folks that are moving from Cox Mill, they're going to a new school. And most of them, unless they should be going to the new school at some point. And I think that's a benefit. And these folks over here moving over to Boger, there's opportunities. I mean, the best case scenario, the Boger can classify for some Title I funding, and that would allow us to do additional things over there. And that's one thing that maybe we have flexibility to maybe do another magnet school at this area. We have talked in the past to Dr. Shepard about doing an arts magnet. There's an opportunity possibly to do a program that would bring people to Boger over on that side. So a lot of this I saw as a best you can do win-win scenario here, but we got to worry about the growth. My big concern here was what's the school going to actually look like when we open? Because we're not talking. I mean, the nice thing about this plan that we're proposing right now and bringing forward, this isn't happening next year. This isn't even happening the year after that. So if you've got a 4th or a 5th grader, it's not going to affect your student. But if you've got a 3rd grader, it has the potential to affect your school. But you've got 2 years to plan. But by doing that now, we're not really quite sure what it's going to look like in 2 years. So that is a concern, like Jeff was saying. Are we taking enough students? I think we're close. I think we have the flex, especially when we just heard that you can hold, I guess, 1,300. I would want to do that, but what else did I have here? I think those were my main points, but I'm happy to answer any other questions on what from my perspective.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mr. Walter. We appreciate your hard work on that committee, and we'll bounce back and go to Mr. Harrison.
And again, many thanks to you and the committee for your diligence and your hard work, parsing this out and getting down into the fine details and understanding the needs of the whole area of the county. Just a general question. My point of view is from the safety of the children and the distance that the children travel either by family car or by bus. And when on one of your slides you indicate that the zones have been compacted to geographically was your term, zones moved closest to the schools geographically. Do you mean that by the way the crow flies or a stone throws, or literally by the bus routes and the mileage that we log every time we take a bus out from some location to another location?
A good example of that is this whole area here and what's blue right here, all these students now go to Boger, okay? And this area we moved to Odell because we didn't like the proximity of the school. This area we left at Boger because even though it's up here and it probably is a little closer to Odell,
It's a straighter shot.
We're going this way.
It's almost a straighter shot.
This one we were comfortable with, This one, passing right by the school, we weren't. So it doesn't always work out perfectly to be, mileage-wise exactly the closest, but we're trying to do what seems like common sense geographically to go, wow, that's really close to the school to not permit them to live, to not permit them to go there. This is not as close. I'm much more comfortable here, and that was why we made that decision.
So you're telling me in a lot of cases, not in every case, but in a lot of cases, parents driving or buses driving the children to the schools will be shorter distances, is what I'm hearing. Not in every case, it can't be.
We certainly tried for that. That is not going to be true in every case, but because of the density, that was what we were striving for.
So the ease of getting to and from the facilities overall will be enhanced.
Absolutely.
Is again my understanding of what you're saying.
And transportation was certainly a big part of that. Bus transportation and Mr. Burnett working with some of the discussion we had earlier, how to move cars in and out along with bus transportation was a good part of our discussions at different times.
To what extent has this plan taken into consideration DOT reconfiguration of Highway 73?
That, to be honest with you, that was probably what Mr. Burnett ended up talking about the most, so it absolutely incorporated how that's going to work to the best of our knowledge.
So the future plans of the DOT in that area have certainly been factored in.
Absolutely.
Again, thank you all very, very much.
Thank you, Mr. Harrison, and we're going to go to Mrs. Carpenter.
Okay, my first question is then you definitely got the people from the farms back to Odell?
Yes.
All right, good, because I was one of the ones sitting here that told them I'd get them back.
They're the little red box up there.
That's what I was thinking, so as long as you got them back, because they'd put me on the skewer and they would put me out to dry.
Right.
So as long as we got them back, that's one of the first things.
Yes.
Okay, now one of the other things, and I'm trying to see if we did, one of the other things, that was one of the things, then there was another group that we had talked about, and they were over there on Misty Wood. I'm thinking that was Misty Wood. It was over, I'm trying to think of the name of the road, but they were over near Concord Mills. It was over in that area, and that was another area because they were in those older homes, and I don't know if you remember, they were in the older homes, and they were wanting to make sure that they stayed at Odell, and I'm thinking that probably kept them in the Odell area.
Cox Mill.
At Cox Mill. And did that stay at Cox Mill?
Under this, they stay.
It did, okay. I just want to make sure, because that was another area that we kind of made sure that stayed in that area, so that's okay. Okay, those are the two areas I wanted to make sure that we didn't bother on those. Okay, I think that may be the only ones that I'm concerned with at this time. I wanted to look at this further, but those were the two areas I was really concerned with. And I'm kind of with Jeff, though. I am still concerned with Cox Mill. I would really like to see it lower, but again, I want to look at this a little bit more closer to see. I'm with you. I'd like to see, here we're building a new school, and that's the reason Cox Mill was one of the biggest reasons we were building it, because that was our highest number. And I would like to see that number lower. I don't know if there's anything else. It looks like y'all have really worked on this, but again, I really would like to see that one lower, because one subdivision could blow that number right out of the water.
Again, I think both of those concerns are it was something we spent a lot of time on. It's one of our fears too. What we get from the county is a future growth projection, and it has that by neighborhood. It has how many homes are built and how many homes are still capable of being built, and that guides a lot of what we made in that decision. And so, again, if you look at that ORED chart, it says, look, all the growth is in the Cox Mill area, and it kind of has a scary number. We hope that what we've done is take that away but this area is a very high-growing area, and which neighborhood will take off the quickest is something that we can't necessarily predict. We just look at all that information and try to make the best projection that we can 2 years out, as Mr. Walter said.
One of the things I did mention when talking to the gentleman that was developing our new school, I did ask him, was there a possibility if we did ever have to go from the concept we have, the 3-5, to make it a full-blown elementary school, was this possible? He said, it could be that we do have that capability to do that. Adjustments would have to be made, but we could do that. You would hate to have to do that, but he said that that could be done with what we had. So I suppose we always have that in our back pocket if we had to do that. But like I say, I would like to see that smaller, but we're always going to see growth in that area. I think you can always see that. And I suppose really with what we've got, we got to work with what we've got. One of the things that Rob just said that I hope that this board would look at all possibilities. He said that he would like to see an arts magnet, but I hope our board will look at all options when we've got sometimes 300 children looking for STEM programs. I would hope we would look at all our options before we would jump on something like that.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Carpenter. And I think we'll leave the future magnets for another conversation, or we'll be here for a while. So we'll come back. We appreciate your comments, and we'll come back to Mr. Shue.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. After doing numerous redistrictings over the last number of years, I like a lot of what I see, Dr. Louder, on this proposal that you have. However, I do share some concern, quite a few concerns, as a matter of fact. Dr. Phillips, his concern about the Cox Mill, and of course Ms. Carpenter's as well. And something that I would like to, sort of keep the board abreast of, and that is land in that particular area is at a scarcity when it comes to finding sufficient land, suitable land for schools. And so whatever we do in order to keep from redistricting time after time after time, we need to take strong considerations in bringing the numbers, particularly in Cox Mill, down as much as we can. And because, the guys that was on the land committee for the school that we're working on, the Odell that we're working on now, looked for a year and a half, maybe even 2 years, trying to find a suitable site. And I don't know what makes us think that that's going to get any easier in the future. And so therefore, that's a good reason to try to bring these numbers down so that we don't have to come back at some other point in the next 2 or 3 years and do another redistricting. But now, based on what I think I understand, that the proposed school that we're talking about, the 3, 4, 5 on the old Odell site, we're just going to probably wait till August 2016 to open that. Is that correct?
No, that depending on when it's finished. Our suggestion was if it's open by the end of first semester, you go ahead and take the Odell students and split them K2 and 3-5.
Okay.
But don't force people to move with 4 months of school.
Right, okay. Well, that was obviously a concern too from the very get-go about starting, switching kids, 3, 4, 5 months into the school year. That was the concern.
The Odell configuration, you would essentially just take 3, 4, and 5, and they would move over here. You wouldn't be
Right.
mixing and matching students.
Because their teachers are moving anyway.
That's right.
Yeah, and we had that discussion before about this briefly, because the teachers, all they're doing is just changing locations 1.5 miles apart. That's it, basically.
Right.
So, that's not going to really be a big deal. But as far as this particular proposal, I'm looking at, I don't understand why that we are wanting to take children from Wynkoff at this stage, knowing that in the back of our minds that we've got a bond referendum coming up in November to replace the Royal Oaks Elementary School. And obviously, we're going to need to pull kids, but if you pull the Wynkoff kids to put them in this redistricting, then when we do the Royal Oaks Elementary School sometime in the very near future, then we're going to have to pull them back, or we're going to have to do something to populate the new school. I mean, we're not going to build a Royal Oaks Elementary just for the 350, 400 kids that's there, because traditionally Cabarrus County Schools has not built small community schools in the last 20 years that I know. The small community schools are the ones that's been here for 50 or 60 years, like the inner city schools, R. Brown and Coltrane and Beverly Hills and things like that. And see, we haven't built any schools like that. And so it would be setting a new precedence for us to consider doing Royal Oaks just for 350, 400 kids. And so I don't understand why we're moving those Weinkauf kids now when we could take those students that you're proposing to take and take them from Cox Mill to bring that number down.
Well, our thinking was, as we said, every time one of these redistricting starts, you start looking at Odell, and then inevitably it affects this one, it affects this one, and suddenly we now are affecting 3 or 4 schools and how we tweak them. Weinkauf, which is right beside of Royal Oaks, so regardless of how that would manifest itself, you have a school here that's full. Because this group was easily, kind of hooked from Weinkauf to take and move over here. If they stay at Boger, there's still plenty of seats. And now, whatever you're doing with these areas, you have some flexibility to say, well, we need to move 50 kids in or we need to move 50 kids out. However you draw the lines, that flexibility would be very helpful in knowing that Royal Oaks is coming down the road in a way that we wouldn't have that flexibility if we didn't create some seats there. And because Boger could easily give us those seats, we said we kind of like that because we spent a good deal of time on this area and how that would work to say that makes a lot of sense. But we also knew that it wasn't necessarily something everybody was going to think of when we started. And, the school board may say, you know what, I'm not sure I like that. But to us, it made a lot of sense to give us flexibility in this area.
And I see the point. I see what you're trying to do. But then again, knowing that, of course, $11 million is not going to build us the Royal Oaks Elementary. And that's sitting in the back of my mind all the time because I know that's coming. And it'll probably be a year or two past the opening of the 3, 4, and 5 Odell. And
Royal Oaks also has a second feeder area, which is not on this map, but it's over here. So whatever you do with Royal Oaks, it kind of comes to a point and it almost has another teardrop that looks just like this on this side. So whenever you start messing with Royal Oaks, you get into a little bit of an area that you don't necessarily think of. And again, that's why we said, well, if we have the opportunity to give some seats and flexibility here, we probably need to do that, knowing that somewhere down the road something's going to change here when we look at how we're going to configure Royal Oaks.
I think regardless of Royal Oaks, it's helpful to lower the population over at Weinkauf. It's going to benefit the kids there. Right now, they're almost at capacity. So it's an opportunity. If you've got seats at Boger, which you do once you do this move, it's an opportunity to bring those folks, lower the population at Boger, and it I think would be helpful for those students to be at a smaller school.
And again, it wasn't much farther. We didn't feel like, to go here to school as far as it was pulling people out. But Mr. Walter's point is definitely something we spent a good bit of time on.
Right.
And 725 was a really good number for that school, which I think is what we were down to.
Yeah, 725, bringing it down. But when Royal Oaks Elementary opens, we're going to pull it down further. And see, another thing too, and like I say, this is not easy for the viewing audience and for, the board members' first time going through a redistricting, and those here to viewing it tonight. This is not an easy thing to do when you move families. And the thing that I always like to try to do was not have to do this too often. Plan far enough ahead where that you don't have to do this, because you see, we haven't had a redistricting other than when we took the kids away from Cox Mill several years ago. And so that would be the ideal situation, is to reduce the number of redistrictings by planning far enough ahead. And you know that if we build the Royal Oaks Elementary to seat 1,000 kids, you got 350. You're going to have to come up with 600 kids somewhere just to get it you won't bring it up at the capacity, but you still have to find 400 kids from somewhere. And if you're sending 80 kids or 100 kids in that area, which will be the Royal Oaks area, sending them away now, then you're going to have to pull them back at some point. And that's going to be another redistricting, and that's what I'm trying to avoid. And that's basically my say-so.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Shue. Mr. Shoemaker, do you have questions for Dr. Louder?
I don't necessarily have questions, but more comments. This is where I live. I live right there on Kannapolis Parkway, and I work that area. Now, if you will put your hand on the farm.
The farm neighborhood?
Yes. Right above that, there's 300 and some homes that have been approved in that area right off of the Concord-Davidson Highway. Right below that, Summers Walk has been approved on Kannapolis side, and there's another 300 homes in there. If you move your hand down to Kannapolis Parkway and 85, there's, oh, and 73, well, 85, there's apartments that are being built right now in that area that are being built rapidly, and that's over on the Boger side. Kellswater Bridge isn't built out at this point. So that whole part of the county is getting ready to explode. I understand about Cox Mill getting ready to explode, but we're getting the leach over on that side where the Odell is right now. So we've got a lot of growth getting ready to happen. More plats have been approved, and more development is getting ready to come. I think that the plan is a good plan because it does plan for the growth of the Odell area, which is going to be probably where a lot more growth is going to be even than in the Cox Mill area. One of the things that I'm concerned about, though, is if we were to take the little boot off of the Boger, we would then drop their enrollment down to 61%. Now, that wouldn't look so hot in the chair that you'll soon be sitting in, Mr. Shue. And so that's probably the reason that they were looking at was more the political nature of that. And I don't want to say it like that, but perhaps it even makes more sense rather than to have one boot, but to shave off part of the Beverly Hills portion and put that at Boger and make that all congruent to Boger rather than having two little peninsulas there. That's something you might want to look at because they're right adjacent to each other. They're running on the same highway. Yeah, so, I mean, I know that parents, but we just bring one more group of folks into the view. So my comment would be, if you're going to have boots, get rid of the boot and just make it a nice even split and make 29 or the railroad tracks your split point on where you district the Beverly Hills and the Boger kids so that you can get more children into the Boger school. Now, next door to Boger is Kellswater Bridge, which is not built out yet, and now I'm seeing a lot of activity over there, and it's getting ready to explode. And the final build out's going to probably is already started in that area. As far as what you have proposed is keeping the children that are up above Mooresville Highway on the Boger. The good part about that plan is you don't have buses crossing each other's paths. Those buses are dedicated. They'll go down Mooresville Highway and they'll go to one school. The buses going to Odell probably will never get to Mooresville Highway. They'll probably be feeding up from the bottom. So it's a pretty efficient transportation plan, from what I can tell, in that response. Yes. I think that based on what you've done, you've done the best you can. The one thing we have to keep in mind is that we do have capacity, core capacity, at each of the Odell schools that have been designed for over 900, even though their actual capacity is a little less. So we do have some capability to add on to those schools if we needed to. And so we could handle a little bit more development in that area, even though we're only building school for 700 seats in the 3-5, 700 and some seats in the 3. Yeah, 777 in the 3-5, and then the current Odell has.
It's about the same. The rate 775.
But it has a core capacity of around 9 something, and the new 3-5 will have a capacity of 9 something, which means we have capability of adding additional seats. So that Odell split is really well positioned for growth in that area and absorbing a lot of the growth that's getting ready to happen. The other thing we've got to remember, Kannapolis has a 5-year plan of adding a sewer system, and they're already getting ready to put water down Odell School Road and out that way. The next thing will follow will be sewer, and once the sewer comes in on the west side of Odell School Road, then development will occur in a much more rapid pace than what it has been. So Kannapolis is kind of right now not there yet, but getting ready to come upon us in the next 5 to 10 years, depending on how growth works in this county. But they will be putting that sewer, and they're going to run that sewer all the way out to, if you look at the farm, go out there, Davidson Concord Highway to the corner of Mooresville and Davidson Concord Highway. Put your finger right on that if you will, right? Yeah, right in there. Right there. They're going to run sewer all the way up to that point. And so then all that land will be able to be developed once the sewer hits out there. So, I mean, in the next 10 years, that area is going to grow very rapidly. So those are my comments. The only real comment is on the Beverly Hills Boger Peninsula that you've got there. What do we do? How do we do that?
I don't want to, when we start doing this again, we get back to that domino discussion where you go, well, gosh, here's Weddington Hills, so we want to bump into that, and here's Beverly Hills, and we want to bump into that, and then you start, and so we try to say, how many schools do we want to affect? Again, when you get down to a small number at Beverly Hills, I should know the number of students there off the top of my head, but it's 350-ish, I think, 375. Again, some of this is density of how many people here, so if you cut that off, then you may take Beverly Hills down to 250 students or something that would be very small. And that was part of our discussion. So even though we discussed exactly what you said and the depth of that, I think as a group, everybody said, let's stop here. It's one less school to affect, and how much are we going to stir up here is the answer to that. But was it on the table? Absolutely. Is it something that we looked at? Yes. But when we were done to go, not sure we want to go there right now. I don't know if that answers or not. But sometimes geographically we'd like to say, well, wow, that's 29, that's where the line's going to be, or that's the railroad track, that's where the line's going to be. And then you find out that 200 students live here and only 100 live in this bigger area. So geographically it doesn't work because it comes down to where they live. And in this whole area here, we really struggle with that, whether it was Weddington Hills or to how do we affect numbers here, because what looks tiny there is actually where everybody lives. Same thing that we're at to here. You get into this area, and this is where everybody lives. So you have this huge area. How do you work around that? And that's when you get that domino effect where we say, okay, let's stop here. I don't think we want to affect another school, but certainly something we discussed.
Thank you, Mr. Shoemaker. I just wanted to add, I want to echo what Mr. Shue said. I think this board, and previous to me being here, has always done a good job. We've moved as few kids as little as possible. I mean, that's kind of the track record, and that's the way. That's what we try to do. But when the county grows, we have to build a school. When you got 12 mobile units out, you got to do something. And that's where we are. And I will tell you the thing that jumped off the page at me. It's my two comments have really already been said, and it was Dr. Phillips hit it right off the get-go. When you just look at the chart, say, well, gosh, we're going through all of this and Cox Mill's the big elephant in the room we're trying to do something about, and at the end of the day, we're still at 87, knowing full well it's going to fill up again. But I can appreciate everything what you've been through to get to those numbers, because 87 is a far cry better than 116%. So I get that. There's really not a lot of negative to say about what you've drawn. I think the things that we're talking about, as Mr. Shue pointed out, are more long-term vision type things. I guess I know in my heart of hearts, until we can really formulate some sort of plan on what we're doing with the smaller schools over a long period of time, we're going to just kind of keep dancing around till we, and that's got to be part of the conversation. But again, the dominoes, you're 100% right. You just can't start rolling across the county and then expect everybody just up and move their school. So for me personally, I looked at this before coming tonight. I wanted to hear some of the thoughts and reasoning. I was interested in hear what Mr. Walter had to say. I haven't been in on the meetings. It's the kind of thing I've just kind of got to look at 2 or 3 times before I really formulate something in my mind of, hey, wait a minute, why are we not doing that? The one piece that and this probably goes against whatever cardinal rules there are of redistricting, you don't ever throw out an area, hey, let's move them when it's not being recommended, because you just made a whole group of enemies. But previously, there's a strip left of 85 in the Cox Mill district that we had talked about sending to Fur, but then we ended up leaving them at Cox Mill. Do you know how many, what the capacity of that is? Do you know where I'm talking about?
I want to say it was the 15 student group that was
15? So it's true.
It's 15. It was 15 students.
Okay.
It did not, because
Yeah.
again, that
Well,
was
that-
something that came up and we said.
That was my recollection.
And it was because they were it was an old established neighborhood, and that was the reason we kept them there, because they had been there and they're kind of out there in no man's land.
Right.
And that was the reason we kept them there.
When you get past past this, and you say, well, what are we going to carve into? Some of those areas you think are going to carve into, there aren't actually any homes. So when you're talking the Ryder Road, which is here,
Yeah,
there's
just
not
pasture
a
land.
lot there,
Right.
So, and a lot of it's
Airport.
commercial.
It's
And so
airport.
then you start looking at neighborhoods and where actually students come from, and there's, even though this looks at, there's not much here. So then if you're going to pull more students out of Cox Mill, you in essence have to dip down here and go, and then we're back into busting up neighborhoods that we discussed.
Which we don't want to do.
Try to avoid.
Well, again, I'm not advocating pulling that out. I wanted my memory jogged because I remember we had talked about that at one particular time, and I did not realize that's the area that Ms. Carpenter was talking about. So that's the end of my comments. We will come back to anybody else that has further something to say. We'll just start with Dr. Phillips since he's down there.
Okay.
We'll come all the way down.
I have a request, something that would help me feel better about whatever decision we're going to make, is if you could work with the city and the cities and county to get information on how many housing units have been permitted in each of those zones that have not been built yet. In other words, like Winding Rock is a neighborhood that's right across the street from where I live, and I know there are houses being built there. How many total are permitted that haven't been built yet? Because
Yeah,
that'll
we get that on a sheet, and it'll say the neighborhood and how many are left and how many projected students by left, so it's great.
okay. So if you could grab that and just categorize it by
Neighborhood.
here's what by neighborhood and also whether that neighborhood would be in the revised Cox Mill area, the revised Odell area, the revised Boga area. I think those three are the only ones you really need to worry about.
Robert, do you have any comments you'd like to make on that? Is that kind of your area of expertise a little bit, or you at least pay more attention to that, I think, than some people do?
I work very closely with Susie Morris.
When you key up, just pull that towards you.
I work very closely with Susie Morris with the county, and as Mr. Latter had indicated, we do get that every 2 weeks updated, and they're doing a real good job with keeping up with the permits now, and we can provide that information for you, no problem.
Okay, thank you, Robert. Sorry to put you on the spot there. Mr. Harrison, did you have any further comment? I know Mr. Shue does.
The only certainties in the world are death and taxes, and that the west side of the county is going to continue to grow. If we could get Cox Mill, the proposed enrollment currently is projected at 87% capacity. If we could get that closer to 82 or 85 or something percent, we would be buying a little bit of time for the potential capacity off several years in that area. But again, you've done a great deal of calculus and you've done a great deal of parsing down of the numbers as best as we can anticipate it. Anything that could give us more wiggle room in the areas that are absolutely, definitely don't need a crystal ball to know that they're going to grow, we'd be helping ourselves and future boards and certainly the families and children in those areas as best as we could. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Harrison. Mr. Shue?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And as you were talking, and you had made mention about the potentially doing smaller schools, and it helped me to better understand why some of the surrounding counties have gone to smaller schools. And it might be that the days of building 1,000-student elementary schools in Cabarrus County might be to an end sometime in the near future, and we would possibly have to go back. They say history repeats itself, and it might be that we may have to at some point go back to the smaller unit size schools simply because you can't find the land where you have to have. DPI recommends 25, 30 acres for an elementary school, and we know how hard it is already to find those types sites. And so what it would mean is that you would have to build a smaller school on a smaller site. And that's where you get back to the community school concept, which again requires another redistricting. And it's a problem that you have with growth. And obviously Cabarrus County has been blessed with growth, and it's probably going to continue, as everyone has said, and we well note that it's going to happen. And but I think, though, that we might be seeing a change in tradition for at least the last 35, 40 years when it comes to building schools. And it might mean that we'll have to start looking at building the smaller community schools. So, but like I say, I don't really find major fault with your plan, Mr. Louder. I don't find major fault with it because I know that your goals are the same as ours. You know, we're all working on this as a team. We're working on it together to do what's right and what's best for the families in Cabarrus County that's got kids in our schools. And that's, as I said earlier, to move less and move as little as you can. But if you think back when we did the Cox Mill move here just a couple of years ago, I mean, we're back now to almost where we were and still got the mobile units and more. So it's just going to be maybe a change of concept for us, and so this might be like an awakening for us. So that's just my thoughts.
Thank you, Mr. Shue. Ms. Carpenter, you had further questions or comments?
Well, just one comment. A lot of you gentlemen, this is your first redistricting, and for some of the rest of us, we've done it before. But one of the things that we always try to do when we do one, we don't want to get into moving the children more than one time. And a lot of the children in some of the, especially the Odell area, some of the, well, I know where I live, like over on Weddington Road, some of those children, they got moved many, many times because at one time, a lot of schools were built at one time. You had Weddington, you had Furr, and so a lot of those kids got moved around a lot. So that's one thing when you start redistricting. You want to try to move the children the least possible you can. So let's just try to remember this. If we go through this, we don't want to, as Lynn mentioned, you don't want to go back to when we do build Royal Oaks to have to move them again. So that's the one thing to keep in mind.
Thank you, Ms. Carpenter. Mr. Walter?
Yeah, I agree with that. And I said, but if you do have to move them, at least let's do something for them. In this case, we have a new school, and then we have this new program where we've got a K-2 school, which is different. We've never done that before, and a 3-5 school where we're able to focus on those age group. So I think that's going to be beneficial to those folks that will be moving into that district. And then the last part is, I know all these numbers here, there's some things they don't take into consideration. Again, this is all kind of guesswork, but it doesn't take into effect the charter school issue, and there is a large charter school, I guess, is opening up around the corner from this area. I don't know if Allison can lead to that, but I think your numbers have actually gone down over the past year. Part of that being, No,
I mean, our numbers went down, but part of it has...
Can you come to the microphone? Thank you.
Yeah, so our numbers went down, but part of it has to do with what we talked about. Mr. Shue was just mentioning that we moved 86 students last year to Furr Elementary School, and then the other, we did lose, I think, 50 children in the final count to the Cabarrus Charter that opened. And so currently, the International Charter School is coming open on Poplar Tent, and then Bradford Academy is coming in the backside of Highland Creek. So we'll see what happens.
And we've also had a successful magnet school program, so I guess some of your students are now going to some of our... So those aren't really into these numbers, but they would bring some of that down. So.
Good point. Thank you, Mr. Walter. One last thing, and then we'll have a public hearing next week, and the board members can ask other questions after that and whatnot. I will not be here next week, but is the proposed boundary, is it on our website? Is it somewhere that as the word gets out in the community they hear, they'll be able to find it and see what we have discussed?
Yeah, currently, our plan is that it will be on the website tomorrow. We're going to take the maps that are here to the 4 schools that are affected, so there'll be a map, and then the 4 schools would get a Connect Ed that ultimately would say that there's, please refer to the website, your school has been affected, and there's a map at your school if you want to look at that. They'll all go out tomorrow. The maps will be delivered tomorrow and be displayed.
Fair enough. And again, we will not be taking action until July. So just so everybody understands, we're going to try to get as much input as we can. And with that, we have one more comment from Mr. Harrison.
Just a request to the media, if it's at all appropriate for them to put the link to such a map on your site in relation to the story. That information is power, and I think I would appreciate that if the media could go to that trouble for us. Thank you. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Mr. Harrison. All right. Well, that wraps up our redistricting portion of the meeting, and we will move on 2. This is two-sided. This is where I always get in trouble. 5.01, we'll move on to things that we're going to, for consideration at our June 9th meeting, and we'll ask Ms. Klutz to come to the podium for budget amendments.